Welcome to the MSP Owner Podcast, where we dive into the journeys of managed service providers, unpacking their challenges, wins, and insights to help you build, scale, and exit your MSP business. So we've got a good one today. Dan Burt is the owner of Solzorro IT Services. He has an MSP based in Utah, and they currently generate $1.6 million of annual revenue with a team of 10 employees. So Dan's journey is an interesting one that I think a lot of other owners can relate to, and common from what I've seen is you make the leap from part-time to full-time entrepreneurship, you hire your first employee, and then you get to 10 employees. So he's done this, over the course of 14 years through lots of chapters. So, personally, I want to thank Dan because he's been a huge resource to me and almost a mentor as I've acquired my first MSP business, DataTel. So we've gotten into it over the last year or so, and excited to have him on. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, man. It's very kind.
Yeah,
good to be here,
man. I'm excited to jump into stuff. I feel like we have, just based off of our own personal conversations that we've had about our businesses, as well as just stuff relating to your background and how you got here. I'm just pumped to dive in. So I want to start off with, how did we first meet?
How was it? I think you posted on Reddit a question about something. And then I was like, hey, I'm happy to hop on a call with you and go over this. And then you were like, okay, reluctantly. We got on the call. And then your first question was, so are you in the habit of meeting strangers on Reddit over the internet? And I was like, no, I just, there's enough people, there's enough space in our industry for everybody. And so I'm happy to give anybody a hand to give them a leg up.
I think it was sales and marketing related. I think I was asking about hiring sales reps and success related to them and what's worked and what has not worked. I think that was it. I just remembered that you were off put, like I was some kind of a scam for being willing to chat with you. But it was no, absolutely. I wasn't actually off put. I was just kind of giving you, I was giving you shit, basically. I was like, I wanted to, obviously, as a new owner in the space, I'm trying to learn as much as I can from other people who have been here, done it, learned it. And obviously there's some people who are really helpful, and you're like in one of those categories. You're a core helper. Like that's like, you love helping other people. You love doing things better. I can tell that from when I've, all of our conversations. So I don't know, that's like a strategy that I used when I'm like, I don't know anything. So what's the best route to learn more? It's like, go talk to the smartest people I can find, and got you on the phone because I posted on Reddit. And so those communities have been really helpful in helping me, do the right things with my own business. So man, thank you for taking that risk and, being able to help out a stranger. I mean, it says a lot about you and what you stand for, honestly.
Well, that's kind of you, but the truth is, as it always goes, I feel like I've benefited just as much from our conversations. That, we've probably had one every quarter since then or so, where we keep each other a little accountable. And I think there's multiple things you've done that have been really smart. Like, oh yeah, I can learn from this. And so
one or two.
But I think ego will prevent a lot of people from learning, and so just recognizing that everyone can teach you something is beneficial.
Nice. So one of the things I've never actually talked about with you is your background, where you came from, how you grew up, and ultimately how you got into the IT business, right? And you live in Utah, and it looks like you were or are an LDS member. So I'm especially curious about your upbringing. What did that look like? How did that inform who you are today?
Oh, Ben, you're opening a can of worms here, friend.
I'm very interested in this. I'm very interested. I feel like it's huge. It's huge.
So I did grow up Mormon. I served an LDS mission. I no longer consider myself to be Mormon, but I left Mormonism about 10 years ago. And it was very painful. I wouldn't wish a faith crisis on my worst enemy. It wasn't something I felt like I chose to do. It wasn't like I was too lazy to live it. I just came to the conclusion that what I had grown up believing was true was no longer as true as I believed it once were. But I served a Mormon mission in Chile. I spent 2 years there. After my mission, I went to Alaska and I drove a tour bus. I would drive people from the cruise ships to the glacier and tell cheesy jokes and just thought I was having fun. And after doing that, I realized I didn't know as much about my own state as I realized and started getting into the outdoors and did a bunch of cool stuff there. And then I used part of my time in college to go backpacking through Europe. And then I spent 7 summers in Alaska driving bus and telling jokes. And, whether it was traveling the world or whether it was being a tour guide, I was just chasing fun, having no idea how much those experiences would inform and influence my entire career. And so I originally went to school to be a firefighter. I was in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, and came across this kid who had fallen asleep at the wheel. And long story short, I spent a couple hours trying to keep this kid alive until the medevac helicopters arrived, and he died. And anyway, the 2 or 3 other experiences I've had it just made me realize being a firefighter is not for me. But, this is back before ransomware. And back in those days, on a bad day, a computer would die. And that's so much better. And so I came back from Alaska. My wife was pregnant. I needed a job that had insurance. I took a job doing Dell tech support. It wasn't great. It was actually a little bit soul crushing, but I realized I liked the industry. I liked computers. I just didn't like that job. And to give you more of my background, I worked for a then small MSP. This is 2009. And there were like 6 people there at the time. And during my 4 years there, they grew from 6 to over 140. And after a while, they started doing things in a way that I didn't agree with. And so I started kind of raising the alarm bells like, hey, this doesn't feel right. This isn't the way we do things here. And they said, well, it is now. And you can either get out and do your own thing, or you can get on board. I thought, okay. So I started my company like that month. And originally we were going to do backups for credit unions and a database for credit unions. And then we just transitioned to being IT. And so that's the high level version of my background.
Wow. There's a lot in there. Can we rewind back to when you were a firefighter and what were the things about that role and that lifestyle that you just thought was not for me?
So honestly, I think being a firefighter is for me. Putting white stuff on red stuff, that's fun. I grew up a pyro. I've always loved fire. And every firefighter, for the most part, is a pyro. And there is a brotherhood to firefighting that, heck yeah, you have to go hang out with your brothers at the fire station 24 hours. Yeah. But at least here in Utah, to be a firefighter, you generally have to be a paramedic first. And being the paramedic side, trying to do the CPR. I've done CPR 3 times. All 3 people have died. And that's statistically correct. So statistically, the 4th person, 25% of CPR recipients live. So I'm saving it for the time I really care. But so it just, there's one case, I gave a guy CPR, I managed the scene, and then I drove like 2 blocks away and I just cried. And I cried. And it's just, I'm a very empathetic person. I really do care about other people. And so I realized I really couldn't work in that field where there's just so much heavy feelings that you carry home with you. Just
how do people deal with that? That seems, you have a 75% quote failure rate in a good day. Like how did other people continue to do that? Like in that role? So
it's interesting. Emergency responders have one of the highest divorce rates. So one could argue that you don't. It does, that's
kind of like the law profession where a lot of lawyers are discontent and a lot of alcoholics there, similar to like.
Well, and ultimately you do have to either become callous and disconnect your feelings from it. Even one of my clients is a law firm who specializes in family law. And the first few times I was around them, hearing them talk about divorce so flippantly, I thought, I don't know if I can work with these people, because morally it just felt so, I felt like you're taking light the worst part of these people's lives. And then you realize you really can't work in the trenches and have it affect you every day. You have to, become callous to it. And for me, I now don't think anything of when I hear people talk about divorce in that law firm. I've been there for 12 plus years. I'm now, I would be appalled by how callous I am to it. And that's how you have to make it. You have to either adapt or die. You have to accept or move on. And so anyway, for me, emergency medicine, I'm so grateful to people who do that, but it wasn't for me.
Man, I don't know. That resonates with me so much, because in my last healthcare business, my last business was a dental company. I struggled with the healthcare aspect, the like delivery of services and dealing with that failure rate. Like, even if you do everything right, you've got all the processes in place, you're still going to have adverse outcomes 1 or 2% of the time that are really scary and you don't know what to protect, right? Or 0.1% or 0.01%. And that always kind of scared me and kept me up at night through that 5 years of operation. So I kind of, not in such a traumatic way that you had, but I felt that struggle as well, just from a personal perspective.
Well, when I perform HIPAA training for my clients, one thing I would point out is that I know it's easy for it to feel just like a job, but you actually make a very meaningful difference when you are in the medical space. My mom is not well. She's on her way out of this world. And she told me that her biggest regret in life is not having been a nurse. She wishes she could have helped more people. That,
wow.
You don't think about what a difference your job is, but there's a lot of stress you have to carry to be caring for other people.
Do you feel like you're still getting some of that with your IT business? Like you still feel like you're helping people and enable these businesses, but
absolutely.
Not to yeah.
No, and I have a friend who used to do like online ad sales, and he left that to do medical sales. And he says he did that because he wanted to help people. But realistically, I feel like there's no greater way to help somebody than help them pursue their dreams. And as an MSP owner, like, maybe it's overly altruistic, but I feel like I help other business owners pursue their dreams, that they can be entrepreneurs. They can do the part of their jobs they do well, because we're protecting them against the things they don't even know they need, or the things that they know that they hate. And so I absolutely feel like, as an MSP owner, I not just make a difference in the economy. I don't just, make jobs for my coworkers, but that I help other entrepreneurs pursue their passions, and I feel really good about that. And I understand I'm not saving lives, but I feel like I'm making a positive difference in a way that I feel like I can be proud of what I do.
Hi, I'm Ben Tigelaar, the host of MSP Owner Podcast and the CEO of DataTel, an IT managed service provider with 35 employees. The mission of this podcast is simple: to have authentic conversations with IT owners about their journey, how it started, the challenges they've faced, and where they're going next. Every episode, I personally walk away with a new actionable item to strengthen my own business. But a quick word about my company, DataTel. We are actively acquiring MSPs who align with our service and culture. So if your company is generating between $1 and $10 million of revenue, I want to talk to you. But wait, you're probably thinking, why me and why DataTel? First is, I get you. I understand the challenges MSP owners face, being one myself, feeling overworked, overwhelmed, constantly being on call, struggling to bring in new business. I have the solutions and people in place to address these pain points. Second is culture. We run our business on EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, which has been transformative for our employees and clients alike. I believe that building a great company comes down to finding and retaining great people who are in the right seats. Everything else is noise. If any of this resonates, it probably means we're a fit and we should be having a conversation. Until then, let's get back to the show. has it transitioned over time to like you first focused when you first started your IT business, you're focused on providing value to the client, and now as you've gotten bigger and you have more employees, now have you shifted at all to now I'm impacting my employees at all? Has that transition happened for you yet?
So here's what I would say. My time as a tour guide really helped influence, like, I learned about value add language. And, when you're making money, your livelihood's based on tips. You learn how much the way you say things matters. And so as an IT guy, for a long time, I felt like a unicorn, that I had social skills and technical skills, and that was very rare. My time as a firefighter helped me to deal with stress, or my time as an EMT. I was never a firefighter. I was EMT. But when you first start doing your business, it's scary. There's an analogy I liked from the TV show Survivor, where they had, I can't remember what it was, but one season of Survivor, they had these two outriggers, and they were trying to make it to the island first. And on the island, there's an idol. And whoever gets the idol first gets to pick their team. And there's like 11 people on each team. Everyone picks one person. And then the last two people just go home. Day one, they don't get to stay. So if they're running these outriggers, some people jumped off way too early and these outriggers left them behind. Others left too late. And then by the time they jumped out, other people were running to shore. So whether you're talking about going from part-time to full-time, whether you're talking about going from a lone operator to hiring your first employee, it's very similar that if you jump too early, you can't afford to be in that space. And if you jump too late, you're going to be losing business because you're not taking care of your customers. And so although I did start the company 14 years ago, I really feel like about 7 years ago is when I started employing people. And that's when things really started to snowball into becoming a real company. But it used to be I stressed and couldn't sleep at night because I was worried about providing for my family. And now I have multiple mortgages and families that I feel like are all on my shoulders, that I really feel an obligation, not just to my family, but also to my coworkers and their families, to make sure that everybody is going to be provided for. And so I don't feel like my stresses have gone down. I just stress about different things. That
so
I used to stress.
Do you feel like that obligation aspect, because now you've got more employees, you've got more personal obligations, you've got a lifestyle that you want to live. So you're saying the stresses haven't gone down necessarily?
No, because where I used to have enough clients that I knew everyone at every client. And so, in a way, I felt like I was a part of, 25 companies. And I would lay awake at night thinking, okay, which of my clients am I most at risk of losing? What do I need to do to make sure I keep them? And now I don't just worry about losing clients, which of course you still do, but I worry about keeping my employees and how do I keep them developed? How do I keep them engaged? And so, and then as one of the biggest lies that people think when they're considering starting their own company is they think, oh, I love the idea of having my own company and not having a boss. It's like, that is such a lie. It's a misunderstanding of running your own company. That it's not that you don't have a boss, it's now you have hundreds of bosses. That my employees feel like just as much of a boss to me as I am to them. That, at the end of the day, I'm the one who gets to decide if they stay here or not, but I have to keep them happy to keep them here. I have to keep my employees happy. I have to keep my customers happy. I have to make sure that I'm looking out for marketing trends. I'm looking out for industry trends, cybersecurity trends, that the amount of responsibility just continues to increase, that what I do in a day changes. My workload has shifted, but my stress, I don't feel like has really gone down. I've had to just change where I focus it.
I feel like this is common, especially in the size that you're in and what other MSPs are in, because you don't have the resources to go and hire someone of your caliber to go and run everything, right? Or take off some of that load. And you're doing it incrementally, right? By hiring capable people. But like, that's a challenge that I see from this kind of $1 to $2.5 million range, is like, everything is still a lot on the owner, right? Like you've got to do sales most of the time. You've got to be the, L4 support. You've got, you're the backstop for any sort of account relationship. Like, do you feel that weight right now, or has that gotten better over time?
So much better. And it would be so disingenuous. My team is amazing. I have an operations manager who, one of the best things that you can experience as an employer is an employee willing to stress on your behalf. And I don't want that for my employees, of course, but I've had multiple employees who have lost stress or, sleep, or who have physically felt the effects of stress. And of course, I don't want that for anybody, but it means the world to me that my employees care, and so my operations manager frequently says, hey, what can I take off of your plate? And he takes care of dispatching. And I have 2 senior engineers who are so great that I have been fully out of IT for the last 2 years. I hired a full-time marketing rep last July, and he's been amazing. And so I'm trying to do all the things you're supposed to do to remove yourself. I'm a huge fan of the book 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And, the concept of getting mavens to do the things that you don't have to do. It's just, I take my responsibility as a business owner seriously. And it's not just a matter of how much money I can make. I have such a great team. I want to make sure that each of them has opportunities to grow and develop. And in order to keep them here, I have to pay them more money. In order to pay them more money, I have to make more money. And so, I'd say half of my job is more about cybersecurity and relationships with clients, and then just overseeing the day-to-day operations. Like I never would have guessed as a kid I would grow up to work a job with so many boring meetings. I'm in 3 or 4 boring meetings a day, and then I spend the rest of my days doing email. And it's like, how did this happen? That I started my own company. I should have the job
you
I
were
want to
going to be a firefighter,
right?
Saving lives, and now you're like in boring meetings.
Well, and firefighters save lives, but they also play ping pong and watch TV and hang out. And
take it best of both worlds.
Yeah, but and to be fair, one thing I love about working in IT is that I can still watch TV or whatever. I have a third monitor that's just shows, and so I still have a pretty good gig. I enjoy the pros that come with being in the IT industry. I've seen myself get further and further removed from the things I used to think of myself as being very good at.
Yeah, part of why I wanted to do this podcast is to get the stories of owners and the owner perspective, because a lot of times people don't ask us. Like, we are the owner, but we've got a lot of hidden responsibilities that people just don't see and that aren't really apparent unless you're talking to other owners. And that's really the genesis for why I think this is valuable to, folks who are considering becoming an entrepreneur, but also to know, like, hey, there's other people out there doing what you're doing. If you're running your business, you can go and talk to other people who can help you unlock.
So I was shocked, like last July, our company has what we call company campfires. They're like town hall meetings. And last July, one of my employees had said, back when you were checked in, and that just like hit me in the gut. Like, you think I'm not checked in? And he was like, well, back when you were working more. And I was like, what? And I was like, look, here's an open invitation. Any one of you, if any one of you wants to follow me for a week and just be with me all the time I'm working, I'll be happy to have you with me. Because I work earlier than every one of my coworkers. I work later than every one of my coworkers. That because they don't see me in the trenches now, resolving tickets and closing tickets, they don't necessarily. And there's part of that I miss. That, when you are closing tickets, you can point to what you did in the day and say, I resolved these issues. And sometimes as a business owner, when I'm responding to emails or I'm, casting a net, or you end your day and you think, I worked 10 hours today. I have no idea if I did any good. And so there's something about closing tickets that's actually satisfying. That anyway, it was shocking to me to have people perceive that if I'm not at my desk, I'm not working.
You're lazy.
Right. And my coworkers, again, who are fantastic, they said, no, we see it. And now whenever they make jokes about me, they're pretty good about following up to say, hey, we appreciate what you do. And so I do feel like I have the best team of any MSP of my size. I'm willing to fight any other MSP owner who says their team's better than mine. I have a local competitor who I really love. We get along great. We challenge each other. I actually encouraged him that we should do like a boxing match this year. Hey, I want to fight you because I want to prove my team's better than your team, and I'll fight you if you say otherwise. And he was like, I'm not doing that, Dan. I was like, you're bigger than me.
Physically fight?
Yeah. I wanted to have like a boxing match, like a promote it. Like, hey, let's promote this. Let's say, hey, whoever wins this boxing match is the better team. And this guy is like 2 or 3 inches taller than I am. He's looks stronger than I am. He's younger than I am.
I think maybe even step it up a notch and have it be like a WWE multi style, right? You've got your operations person, your lead technician.
Tag team. I love it. That said, although my guys, I surprisingly employ a lot of musicians. I feel like a third of my guys are musicians. I don't know that many of my guys would do well in the octagon.
That's great. Can we rewind a little bit back to when you I feel like there was an inflection point when you hired your first employee. You'd said like roughly 7, you said it was 7 years ago you hired your first employee, right?
Yep.
What allowed you to go from no employees to 1 employee? Like, what was the trigger? What did you feel? How did you know?
And the first thing I'll say that the recipe of my success has started off by using contractors. Former coworkers became tenant and contractors. And so I still use some tenant and contractors today. And so that allows us to do bigger jobs and scale up. But when I started using a part-time, like a college student, and I was using him 30 to 40 hours a week, and I thought, okay, and I'm ready to hire someone full-time. And then I received a contract that was going to be a $5,000 a month contract. And I was like, perfect, that's an employee. And so historically, that's kind of how I justified hiring, was always, I got a managed client and they're going to be, or I get 3 managed clients and these are going to be enough to hire an employee. I've always known that the biggest opportunities on the back end. And so my perception is that a lot of MSP or entrepreneurs or small business owners fail because when they see their first payday, they take it. And so I have thrown off payday after payday after payday. Like I'm still in the same house I was before I started my company. I have kept and my life is better. I'm certainly living a better lifestyle. I don't mean to make light of that, but my life has not increased exponentially based on how much my net worth has increased based on the value of our company. And I've continued to hire really good guys. I've continued to give my guys raises. I continue to try and find ways to incentivize my guys to stay long term. And so when I started my company, I literally had $70 in my bank account. I had nothing. And so it took me 6 or 7 years to have anything, because I bootstrapped the company in that I would do a job. I'd get paid $200. I'm like, awesome, I'm going to buy a logo now. And then I would do a job and get paid and say, great, I'm going to get a website. I'm going to get a shirt, an embroidery. Just, every single thing went back into the company. And even just this year, my wife, who's been so supportive, was like, hey, when we started Solzorro, a Costco trip used to be $200 and now it's $600 and our pay hasn't really gone up in the last couple of years. Like, we need to bring more in for our family. But I've just been so focused on the back end, feeling like that's where success lies. And so as a result, in the last few years, and we've consistently grown over 30% year in, year out. And that's easy when you're going from 100,000 to 130,000, but it's a lot harder when you're going from 1.2 to 1.6 mil. And so what we've just tried to do is, be responsible. I've put money in the bank. So we've always had savings so that my employees have never had to risk me being late on payday. That we make sure that, and so anyway, I'm telling a lot here, Ben, so I appreciate your patience. But for me, the biggest part was making sure that if I hired somebody, they would never have to worry about whether they were going to make their payments. And so we've really invested heavily on the front end of our employees so we could benefit on the back end of our company.
It feels like sacrifice is like a core tenet of what you've done. Like time and time again, right? You were saying, oh, I'm going to wait off till later to do this thing because I want to invest in either other people or in, the future, right? Something you can't touch right now. It's not in front of you, but it's there, right? Kind of that. How do you, it seems like it's ingrained in you. Like, where did that come from?
So everybody says this, and I'm no different, but I grew up pretty poor. There was a 3 or 4 year period as a child where my dad didn't have a paycheck. 8 of us lived off my grandpa's Social Security. There was points when I was a teenager where I had a job and my dad did not. And so, my parents did the very best they could, but they struggled. And so every single day, I think it's a miracle. The life I live, I can't believe it. That, how well my family does. And the truth is, we're now aiming to make more and more as our company. But there were a few years there where I was just so content, like, oh my gosh, I don't, for me, it's just a miracle. Like this might not sound like a big thing, but even just last year, I heard my son, who was 15 or 16, tell my wife he wanted an Ohio State hoodie. And it was like, you can ask for specifically what you want for clothes. Like by the time I was 13, I was paying for all my own clothes. That my parents stopped buying me shorts or pants when I was like 11. So for me, I just feel like so grateful for what I have. It doesn't feel like a sacrifice that I don't spend more because I'm spending so much more than I ever could have imagined as a child.
It seems just part of you. And you've really like dove into it and embodied it, but then still you've got your long-term upside of where you're taking the company. Obviously you're building significant net worth as you grow your company, but maybe you're not tasting it right away. And that sacrifice is what enables the future to happen. And a lot of people can't stomach that. Don't have the patience.
And it's not like I don't want to put out some sort of perception that I haven't any way enriched my life from this. My family's been able to go on some really great trips, but even when we were, poorer, that we've always done a good job of going camping, of getting away. That just, I'm a big believer that, in that altitude fixes my attitude. So getting out to the outdoors helps me to relax. But one thing that's really helped me professionally is I've taken some of profits from our company and invested into real estate. And so that I have a fourplex, and that fourplex is my parachute that, like, in a worst case scenario, I can sell my fourplex and then I can keep funding my company. And that has really helped me to feel like I could focus on growth, because that financial stability that I feel like I have found through being frugal has allowed me to now feel like whatever happens, I have something in the background I can fall back on. And so the last 2 years have been really focused on growth for us, which we couldn't have done if I didn't feel like my finances were in order.
You got to have that baseline stability to know, and foundation to know, hey, I'm going to be investing in this stuff and taking some risks. And so the last couple of years have been focused on growth. What does growth mean to you? It sounds like 30% a year is like what your goal is. Is that?
No. So yes, but no. So 2 years ago, I was having a key strategic planning meeting with my key focus group and my 2 senior engineers and my operations manager. And 2 of them came to that meeting for the year saying, it's time for Dan to get out of IT and focus on growing the company. And so that's awesome to get buy-in from your coworkers to do that. And so I tried hiring 2 or 3 different outbound SDR, like sales development, who would do outbound leads for us. I won't say the names here, but they're 2 of the biggest names in the space. And I spent a lot of money, tens of thousands of dollars, about $100,000 and a year of them making outbound calls to not make any good leads on our part. I hired a marketing guy who he's so sharp. He's a brilliant, talented guy, but he was going through a lot and his personal struggles really prevented him from succeeding professionally. And so I joined multiple networking groups. And so I've just kind of hired an outsourced marketing officer. And so I would say in the last 2.5 years, I've spent upwards of $250,000 or $300,000 towards just growth. And some things have worked, but some things haven't. And that's, year one, it was like, I've spent the last 9 months and we are growing the same rate we've always grown. If I would have done nothing, would we be right where we are? Could I have taken this year off? But the truth is so much of work is about dividends on the back end. And so our company today experiences dividends from when we were making next to nothing. But, there's the weeks where I was working 60, 70 hours a week, but only bringing home $40,000 a year is paying dividends today. And the things that we're doing today, I think are going to pay a lot of dividends tomorrow. And so what we've kind of done is shotgunned it and just, we're putting money everywhere, trying to see what works. My wife, who's one of my greatest advisors in my life, she said something like, I hired these SDRs, these outbound sales development guys, to grow my company because I wanted to believe that I could just pay somebody else to grow my company for me. And it's like, no, you need to have more skin in the game. And so through our AdWords campaigns, through SEO, we've tried just about everything. And we've really found, we feel like we're now starting to find like what's really working for us. There's another podcast, the MSP Camp's No Fluff Marketing podcast, No Fluff MSP Marketing podcast. And they've been super helpful for us as well. And we went to ScaleCon, that combined conference or convention between Tech Tribe and an MSP Camp. And after that, where we've been growing 30% a year, my marketing guy and I decided we want to double the size of our company in the next 2 years. And so 30% is what we expect to be happening on its own. And we've had some clients who have had some struggles this last year. We had 3 different clients who got acquired. Our biggest client went through a merger that, even knowing that we might be losing half of our recurring revenue, we've still felt like we're going to double our income in the next 2 years. And I feel like we're really laying groundwork to make that happen. And so,
wow,
it's
amazing.
taken years to make the infrastructure so I can now focus on growth. And I feel confident we're going to do it. And that makes this the most exciting time of my career, that I come into work early, I leave work late. I'm usually not the first one here, but I'm one of the first ones here, and I'm always the last one to leave. And, there's so much. Just the other night, it was like 7:00. My wife called me, told me it was time to come home. I went home, had dinner with my family. I wanted to go back to work and I couldn't. I just found myself unable to do it, and just realized there's so much truth to the Newton's first law, of inertia, that once you get something going, it's easier to keep it going. And so I have felt like all of our efforts have culminated to this moment where we're now getting things to keep going on their own. And that's been very rewarding.
It seems like you're a very hard worker, and you have been for a long time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I feel like hard is subjective, but as someone who has been working since I got my first job when I was 13, I was washing dishes at a local restaurant. And, there are ways in which I feel like I worked harder when I was a teenager, when I was, busting payrolls or washing dishes, that or I used to do construction, that's hard work in a different way. But I have long believed in the value of work. I feel like I certainly couldn't retire today, but when the time comes that I could retire, I expect I will keep working longer than I have to, because I think there's a lot of value in work.
And you enjoy it seems like.
I enjoy the work I do now. I did not enjoy the work I did as a teenager. But I've certainly, and even like when I worked at Dell, like that was a soul crushing job. And I know we buy Dell computers. I'm not against Dell, but some of the jobs I've worked, I've hated, but they helped advance my career to get to the point that I loved.
So you're at $1.6 million of revenue. You're looking to have some massive growth in the next 2 or 3 years, even with some, top customer potential issues down the road. How are you going to achieve that? And like, what are the things that would prevent you from achieving that? Like if we were to look 3 years from now and we're having a conversation, what do you think would be the things that why it worked or why it didn't work?
Great question. There's things that are completely outside of any of our control. That of course, AI being the 800-pound gorilla in the space that we just have no idea. And, and then you look at the economy that, right now there's this concept of tariff wars and what's going to happen in the economy in 2 years, what's going to happen in our industry, that there's so many things that are outside of our control. What I will say is, talking to a good friend of mine recently, I was pointing out to him that I'm on a good trajectory, but I could lose everything in a couple of years. And he said, Dan, if you've lost everything, that's a bad sign for all of us. That's more to do with the industry than in the markets than in our economy.
Yeah, that sounds more like a personal. That doesn't sound like a realistic statement when you say, "Oh, I can lose everything." Like that's just not even possible. That feels like a personal narrative rather than an actual fact.
Well, I certainly hope so. There's that Mark Twain quote of, "In my life, I've had many fears, very few which ever happened," or something. That it's very common for all of us to rob the good times with doubts for things that never occur. But when I look at the next couple of years, I think that the biggest things that will be about keeping myself going professionally is keeping my house in order. That, the book Millionaire Next Door talks about how something like 90% of millionaires in America are, and my numbers are a little bit off here, but there are people who own service companies who are on their first marriage. And so I think that keeping my personal relationship with my wife and kids is an important part of that. And I also think that keeping my eye on the ball of not overextending ourselves. And so one of the things they talk about at ScaleCon was people will do marketing efforts, get a bunch of leads, so they stop doing their marketing efforts. They close those leads. Now they have no leads, so they increase their marketing efforts. And so one thing that we are resolved to do is to not take our foot off the gas when it comes to what we're doing. And so we have augmented our marketing. We've hired someone through Upwork to do our SEO, who's a full-time guy who works 30 hours a week for us doing SEO. And we're paying him less than we paid a local company, and he's doing more. And so one thing that we're trying to make sure we do is get accountability from our vendors, that we want to make sure that we see what we're getting, that we get the value, and managing our client relationships. Because even if you look at how our business has grown, so much of our business has come from client referrals. That if I've been on the MSP subreddit for 14 years, and you see people who will say, yeah, we just grow without even doing anything. Once we try and grow, it's going to be easy because we just get all these client referrals. Like that's actually not unique. I feel like that's very, very common.
Not at all. And just from a business buyer perspective, right? Because I acquired one, and I've talked to a lot of owners. When I hear, "Oh, we get all of our clients via referrals," that's usually code for I have no sales or marketing process or methodology. That's really what it says.
Yeah, that I have no idea how I got here.
No idea. Just, did stuff. I'm like, great. So I've got to build a whole sales and marketing engine. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so what we have found is that there is truth to that our easiest referral source are our clients. And so when we have SEO and AdWords and, even knocking doors, when these things go right for us, we actually have systems we put in place to know at what point we ask for referrals from those clients. So whenever we get a new client, like we got a new client about 4 years ago who was a credit union. They referred us to 4 other credit unions. They referred us to a union. They referred us to a trade school. They referred us to some of their, and just one referral is now responsible for like 12 clients we found. And so in understanding that, we recognize we need to deliver on every client opportunity we get so that we can have every client be both revenue and a referral source. So we picked up a client last year. We're really big about the analytics of where we get our clients, what industry they're in, and what we found was we picked up a client last year through an AdWords campaign. We have been doing a small amount. It's like $2,000 a month or something of work for them, and mostly it's licensing stuff. We gave them a security quote yesterday. The company they were using was charging them $86,000. Our quote was $60,000, and 3 years from now, the competitor would charge them another $80,000. Our quote for 3 years from now is $40,000. They came to us yesterday saying, "Hey, we do these same things for our clients downstream. Would you be interested in servicing them?" And it's like, yes. And so part of what we believe, and everyone has like their niche. There's a reason why you became an owner. There's a reason why you're thinking about starting a company. There's some sort of a need that you think you can fill. For me, I wanted to feel good about where I worked at night. I wanted to feel like I was doing right by the customers. And so it started out very altruistically, but that's become our business model, that we do right by our customers day in and day out. And as a result, they love us and they become a referral source for us. And so we have found that by knowing how to leverage these opportunities, we can often get more out of every client. So I think most of our clients, and then this isn't unique to us, I think a lot of people love their IT providers, that your IT provider keeps you safe, solves your problems. They're heroes. You just don't necessarily think about giving them a referral unless you're asking for it. And
how do you, it sounds like what you identified with your referrer, at least, is like, I would qualify that one client as a super referrer, right? Like there's someone who
absolutely
they provided you 10 to 12 clients over the course of 4 or 5 years, right? And the reality is that person that one client probably makes up 75% of your referrals, right? Or, so like, it feels like this is a game of, you have to find who your super referrer is and be able to nurture that, because then they're going to be able to, and the rest are probably not going to. Or have you seen a wider dispersion on your end?
So we have found we have a partner that he does our cable pulls. And so we do IT, he does cabling, and we've cross-referred. That one person is responsible for 25% of the revenue in our business. And so, more than any one client, it's actually a partner who we cross-refer business. He has been one of our best lead sources. And so that's one thing we're trying to do, is cultivate relationships with other print companies or other phone companies and make sure that we have relationships where we can be mutually beneficial, to have that synergistic value of cross-referring. But one thing that we have found is that if we sit down with the client when we first pick them up and make a roadmap of here's how we're going to onboard you, here's how we're going to resolve your issues, and communicate all the way through, when we go to meet with them after that, they will frequently think we're trying to raise the rates because we've done so much more than they expected for that amount of money. And when we just make sure they're happy and say, hey, we're looking for other people who might also benefit from our services, people are really good about saying, you know what? I do know these other people who are using the same IT provider we were using, and they'd be much happier with you.
Makes sense. So we've got 3 years from now, we're also having a conversation. What are the things that are going to prevent you from getting to where you need to go? Is it people? Is it getting enough clients? Like, if you were to point it towards one thing, what would that be?
So I think the two biggest variables there are keeping our clients. And, we lost a client last year that I feel like the employee made a mistake that led to them leaving. They say it's due to their acquisition, but I feel like we could have kept it. And so, there's a housekeeping measure of making sure that we keep the right guys on our team, and that
keep the quality up, keep the service intact. while you
Yes.
focus on growth.
And so that's the first part, is making sure that, I can't sell something I don't believe in. And if we're not delivering on it, I can't believe in it anymore. And so making sure that we're making good on what we're saying we're doing internally. And then realistically, when I look at the majority of our clients who have left us over the last 7 years, almost all of them have been due to acquisition. Not all, but almost all have left because an acquiring company brought their IT provider on, and that's how we lost them. And
has anyone figured that out yet? How do you turn the tables on that? Because that's a very common thing. Like, people say that all the time. Larger company comes in, buys this one, and then they're gone. But I've heard it more negatively from the MSP owner perspective, that like we're always in the backseat and we're usually at the acquired company rather than at the acquiring company.
So I don't take it personally, because I've benefited from it just as much. We've had a client who's acquired like 8 other medical practices, and then we've been the incoming and they've been the outgoing. In some cases, like we just had, who is our current biggest client, they went through an acquisition, and I've been so nervous about losing them. And then they called me like 2 weeks ago after the acquisition went through. And they said, "Hey, we want you to know that we fought to keep you." And I thought, okay, this is just lip service. Here's the phone calls. And they said, and the company agreed that their IT will do the East region and we'll do the West region. So you guys are still in the mix. And it's like, awesome. And so one of the best things we did was just make our client love us to the point that they did fight for us. But in understanding
that is unusual.
Yeah,
that's amazing, man. It's a huge win. That's a testament to you and all the work that you've put in.
And it's also a testament to my awesome team,
obviously.
That they're the ones who I feel like are the ones who have been so delightful and so great response times that kept them. And so, but you can't control that. So I feel like the only variable you can control is the new clients you're bringing in. And so you want to keep what you have, but you have to keep growing, because there is so much truth to that old adage of, if you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah, we've got a few clients who are acquisition hungry, right? They're going and acquiring multiple companies a year. We've seen a lot of growth from them. And so
those are great clients.
I know. I'm like, man, I am really interested in this space where it's like, man, maybe going larger and focusing kind of this mid-size space who are actively acquiring. They need extra support and help, because we're doing so well for this client, and we're solving a huge need. And I'm like, man, this could be the niche that we transform our business into. And
that's the best niche.
We're the acquiring company because they have lots of integration challenges. They don't have a consistent technical stack. They have a lot of technical debt. They're trying to get things done. They're at a point where they have enough money that they just want stuff to work. They start to care about cybersecurity. And so that's like an area that we're really, really excited about, because we've been getting a lot of traction. And it's the opposite of what I've heard for MSP owners, which is like, we have a small business client and they got acquired by this bigger company and we're out of the mix. Like, that's the story 85% of the time. And 15% of the time, it's like, we got lucky. That's kind of like my gut feel after.
So when we started, I first thought I was going after micro small business. Like, boy, there's so many 3 to 5 user companies that nobody seems to want these. They swear I should just focus my whole industry and my whole career. It's like, no, it takes, almost as much effort to make a 300 person company HIPAA compliant as it takes a 3-person company. That, so there just isn't the kind of ROI there. And so, yeah, when you realize the bigger the client, the more volume there is, there's a lot of opportunity if you can prove yourself in that space.
Cool. I think it's time to wrap up. So, Dan, I really appreciate your time digging through your history and your business. You are making some strides and moving stuff forward. I have high confidence that you're going to figure it out. And in a couple of years from now, we're going to have a conversation and you're going to be like, I did it. There were some bumps. There were some unexpected surprises and opportunities. And I'm about where we thought we were going to be. That's my guess.
Well, thanks a lot, Ben. I really appreciate you having me on and I appreciate your confidence.
Yeah. Talk to you later, man.